So hi everybody, it's Chief Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we're going to continue our discussion about the two of you. Ultimately, you're going to find out the real name of this series, but we're talking about the different ways that people can look at a situation and how we go about factoring that into the kind of work we're doing as change agents of whatever nature we are, human development professionals. So I'll review that very quickly in just a moment. But before I jump into that, a question came through me for Brian, and that is, how does cortisol sometimes express itself as excitement or as a positive kind of an energy? So Brian, any thoughts on that?
How does it say again?
Oh, yeah. How does cortisol? Let me read the exact question to you. Just one second. What is the mechanism for cortisol causing euphoria?
Oh, that's good. See, cortisol is always released in the body for different functional reasons or purposes, I should say.
Yeah.
But soon as it is released, depending on the situation, depending on that neurochemical soup,
Mm-hmm.
the body also releases hormones to try to balance it so that it's just enough to do what the situation is requiring one to do. So it's really a situational thing.
Well, but I know that cortisol is released from stress because of stressors.
Yeah, anytime the body goes beyond homeostasis. So like when you exercise, you're releasing a certain amount of cortisol.
Well, and that's
so
where the
when
question
people
is
get
coming
excited,
from. Why do people get a runner's high? So why is it that when you put yourself deliberately under some type of stress, your body's response can be described as euphoric? So, and I thought, well, maybe it's because there's also a lot of other things happening up there. So we know that endorphins tend to be running very high when cortisol is being triggered, right? Didn't the whole adrenaline and noradrenaline?
Right. You see, that becomes that soup. So, because when you're talking about endorphins, you're talking about opiate receptors. And so it's actually masking the bad aspects like pain that you might be going through. And so then you keep going. And so, that's why it's important to understand the situation that people are in, because the different neurochemicals that are emitted at that time are responding and interacting with different receptors on the other end. And so that's why there's no neurochemical that acts as a lone actor. They typically have hosts and they have co-conspirators, but it's all situational based on the situation. And so that's why, the tension management perspective accounts for all of that. Essentially.
Well, it certainly does, because when I think about where would I be on the change grid to be experiencing some type of euphoria, I would have to imagine that euphoria is a heightened state.
Yeah.
So it's a stimulant state or a stimulating sort of state. And so that means it's either going to be more up grid, out grid, or between the two. So it's happening up here. And from our discussions about neurotransmitters almost 2 years ago, or more than 2 years ago now, this is also where the endorphins and adrenaline come into play.
Right.
Or epinephrine and adrenaline come into play. And then the endorphins were right here in power stress. They come into play. So when I think of those things working all together, these are all stimulant sorts of things. So you've always said that something has to be counterbalancing it.
Right. Because, the body is always seeking homeostasis. So we're designed for that. And so that's what can make something rather difficult or rather easy, depends on our narrative behind what it is that we're actually trying to do.
But I would think people would tend to frame euphoria as being a positive experience.
Right.
But euphoria could very, very well be a warning to you.
Exactly.
You're on the edge of something your body is considering to be of noteworthy stress.
Exactly. Think about those who are, suffering from addiction, right? They go through euphoria, but the damage that they're creating is what they're disassociated with.
Right. And I like your idea about connecting it to pain because, again, this question came up because of sports kind of performance. And so if you are experiencing a runner's high or, you're on any kind of an endurance sort of long haul activity, bicycling, whatever it happens to be, it may very well be that your body is delivering the state of euphoria to you because it needs to, as you said, dull the pain. It needs to do something to help you escape from the reality of what's going on in the situation, something to kind of distract you from whatever the negative stuff is going on. So as I start to describe that, it's like, is your body giving you euphoria? Just say to you, like, look, this is the best drugs I can give you. You got to stop what's causing this.
Right, right.
You
So it's
know?
your body giving you that in terms of the experience, but it's also matching up with the belief systems and the attentional faculties of what you're paying attention to. And so
Mhm.
it's all of those, that kind of alignment that's happening there. That's what keeps it going.
Right,
And so
right,
that becomes the conditioning, if you will, that they'll go and
right.
do it again.
Yeah, and that's why it can become, those kinds of behaviors can become quite addictive. I'm talking about
Hmm.
endurance, running, endurance, bicycle, anything that you're putting your body into enough stress long enough that it needs to do something to self-protect or whatever. Yeah. Okay, anyway, thank you for that. I will pass on the information to the individual who queried. All right, so last time around we were talking about how to talk to the two of you, and by the time we were done with it, I said, look, you need to remember that when you put together a change grid, whether it's one question or a whole bunch of them, that you're never sure who's actually responding to it. Even if you email it to a single individual and that individual is physically filling it out, you don't really know who's filling it out. And so we want about who are these possible who's? Well, the possible who's are either the individual of you that is very attached to what's going on. Um, you're the one that the attached to is in that moment, feeling whatever you're feeling with whatever perceptions you have going on by whatever it happens to be. You're in it. So this is it. You're attached to what's going on. But the other you that we could be looking at is the detached you. And the detached you is that very separate, quiet voice that says, I know that I'm in a situation of whatever characteristics it has, um, but I need to observe it. I'm going to step out of what's really going on around me so that I can better assess what's happening. I can better make whatever new choices need to be made and move myself in that direction. So the detached you is more of the observer, and the attached you is more of the experiencing, the experiential you. Um, so we were talking about that when someone fills out a change grid, I believe that the change grid they're filling out is coming from the attached them. So unless I actually lead someone through an exercise of deliberately detaching from an activity, I am looking at, I believe, far, far, far more often than not, the answers that the attached them came up with. Are we all in agreement on that? Is that just a nice review for you guys? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I want to, as a human development professional, I want to meet people where they are. And so I want the attached them to answer the change grid. And then as I look at what the attached them is actually experiencing, I can see how I would use detaching as part of their um, what do I say, their I don't want to use the word therapy, but the way we go about helping them to come up with other options, other insights, other ideas. I would be asking them to move into the detach them deliberately. And as we said last time around, a great many people, for a great percentage of their time, lose touch with the fact that they can detach, and that the detach them looks at a situation more objectively and can, help support them a lot better. But they haven't experienced their detached self for so long, they may very well have forgotten about it. And so every moment of every day is somehow or another being experienced by an attached version of themselves. Again, so far so good. Is this making good sense?
Yes.
All right. So now again, I meet them where they are. I want to know what the attached them is saying, but I may be using the detached you as a tool to help them do that. And ultimately, if we're going to be working in the, using that word development as part of it, I would like to have them become so comfortable, so reacquainted with their detached self that they can move into that whenever they choose. And maybe, just maybe, they can start to live some portion of their day in that detached state. And maybe, just maybe, after a long habit of practicing detachment, they become more generalized detached from what's going on. And that would make them less susceptible to the manipulations that are going on all around them all day, every day, in every way. Again, we're all on track for what we're talking about here.
Yes. Would that be the PowerPoint
Yeah, well,
maneuvers?
ultimately,
You can work with them on that.
the PowerPoint maneuvers would certainly move them there, but I could actually be far more direct and say they've described their situation from their attached viewpoint. And I could certainly say to them, all right, for just a moment, I want you to do a little exercise. I'd like you to leave your own body, leave your own mind, and simply observe what's going on, what's really going on. So what would that detached you see differently, hear differently, say differently, value differently than the attached you is currently doing? And so I would just kind of put them into all that rather than going like, let's find some PowerPoint maneuvers. But if I'm trying to develop them more to be a person who can easily access the detached state and perhaps spend a good portion of their day in the detached state, then we would want to get into the PowerPoint maneuvers so that we could let them know, look, anytime you want to get back into this frame of mind, here are some things that you can certainly do. And they're different for every person, obviously, so you'd have to help them to figure out what are their detached things. But obviously things like uh, meditation, and I believe just about anything could probably serve as a meditation, but meditation, anything about the kind of any of the exercises about being aware of you being in your body in that moment, sort of practices could certainly help, to do that. All right, anyway, so what I want to kind of move on to now, without making this too complicated too quickly, although it's going to get a bit complicated, is that, when you are not listening, no, when you are in the attached you, what percentage of that attachment has formed because of other voices outside of you, other influencers outside of you, people with an agenda, people with insights, positive, negative, whatever it is, but you're getting input from things happening outside of you. And that input from things outside of you is impacting the attached you. So it's impacting how you're attaching to something, how strongly you're attaching to it. And as we look at about attachment, where it lands on the change grid, how that attachment is being experienced and expressed. Would you guys agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, everybody, too, silence is agreement, but there's a lot
Yeah,
of.
that's good. And I'm thinking, boy, oh boy, I'm going to listen to this when you put it up on YouTube. I'm going to listen again because you get it the first time, but I think you get it even more as you really let it sink in.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
what I want to make sure I'm explaining it. You guys are all very bright people. I'm not trying to dumb it down. I'm just saying that it really is a drink out of a fire hose if you haven't really thought about this before.
Yeah,
That
it's one you have to spend time reflecting on. Like journal. So I was reflecting on how much the attached self really, I guess, hosted a fixed mindset. Like it became the conditioning, whereas to focus things from the detached mindset, you have to really sit back and reflect, ask why questions, and
Right.
suspend judgment and all those different kinds of things. And so,
Right.
you can hear it once, but I think this takes some practice.
Right. Well, I think to kind of put it at a more level of civilization or a level of the spiral dynamics we've talked about before, um, there's a continuum that we've looked at or on another layer of the change grid that talks about chaos to order. And
Mhm.
that everything is always somewhere along a spectrum between chaos and order. Um, so right now, would you describe the world that we're living in as leaning more towards the chaos end of things or the order end of things?
Are you trying to
Chaos.
be funny?
No, I'm being, yeah, well, everyone has their own way, their own vantage point. That's the whole thing. And so this idea about chaos is definitely going on around you. Well, what we want to do is recognize that the only cure for chaos is not order, but is detachment.
Mm,
So soak in that for just a second.
Yeah, say that again.
Yeah, the
really?
only cure to chaos is not order, but is detachment.
Mm,
Because my belief is that if the pendulum swings from very chaotic to very ordered, you're going to end up with some type or types of authority making quick decisions that are not coming from a detached place, but are coming from a different version of attachment.
yeah. Gonna be resistance. That's what you're going to experience. And that's what
Right.
we're
It's
seeing.
going to, the pendulum wiggle can swing
Yeah.
too far the other direction because we're going like the only way that we can fix chaos is by imposing strict elements of order. Anywhere and everywhere chaos. The only cure for chaos is order. That's not correct. The cure to chaos is detachment. Now, detachment we have to be careful of because I don't want people to think that I'm saying the cure for the world is to everyone just detach from everything that's going on in the world and like it's not really going on. When I'm talking about detachment, I'm talking about detaching for a moment to be able to more I want to say beneficially examine what's going on around you, to be able to filter out some truth from some fiction. I'm not talking about detachment as in apathy, although there is uh, kind of a, I want to say, if I look at the many definitions of what detached actually means, detachment can mean apathetic about it. And that's not the answer. The answer to chaos is not. In fact, on my Facebook page today, I put up something that I shared something I found somewhere else. Just a second, so I can kind of tell you what it is. It's a quote from somebody somewhere, no doubt. Um, one moment, please. Why isn't my computer cooperating? Can you find my Facebook page faster than I can? What on earth is happening? What's happening? My computer is so misbehaving. Anyway, um, it said something that if you fundamentally what it said was that if you detach yourself from what's really going on in the world around you, you're going to be ruled by evil men. Now this goes back to Plato or somebody, I almost said Pluto, but that yeah, that's a planet or a Disney dog. No, Plato.
Okay, here we go. It's by Plato. The price good men pay for indifference to public affairs is to be ruled by evil men.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Now,
Wow.
so, and I think that plays out in many different areas of life. So I'm just saying that when I'm talking about detaching from something, I'm talking about detachment as a skill, not as an escape. Detachment as a tool for making better decisions about what's going on, to become more objective, as opposed to, well, wait, if I'm not being objective or subjective, is there like I'm not in any way an active? I mean, it's this idea about separating oneself or isolating oneself from what's going on. That's not what I'm talking about. So is that a fair enough distinction to be made? We're talking about detached as
Yes.
indifference.
So it's like a
Detached,
centering, would you say?
it's a centering. I'm trying to become objective about what's going on when everything else that's happening around me is highly subjective. Maybe it's not, maybe it's the subjective assessments of others that are being shared, if not imposed upon me. Maybe it's my own subjective voice in my head that's working with my own biases and all that. I don't know, but all that subjective stuff is occupying space that my objective mind needs to step into, at least periodically, or at least situationally, to really find out what's going on.
How do you do that, if I may ask?
I
Because I
usually
remember
don't.
when I asked about the January 6th committee, and you had talked about how your objective is to always look at these kinds of things through the lens of
Tension
tension
management.
management.
Yeah.
And so
And
I thought about that because it feels like, I don't watch news, but it feels like the more I read about it, it's hard for me to sustain
right.
optimism that
Yeah.
I'm naturally, inclined for.
Yeah. Yeah. Optimism is not a very powerful, what I want to say, a very powerful value proposition in the world of marketing. It's there.
Mm,
There's certain people that respond to it, but you got to remember the media is funded by advertising. And so
yeah.
advertising is about grabbing people's attention. And I'm sorry, but upgrid and outgrid stuff is far more likely to get press coverage than ingrid and downgrid
Mm,
stuff. It's just
yeah.
the way that it is. And so if you are, again, these are external forces that are, you know, providing you with insights that may or may not be a true representation or an accurate representation of what's really going on. Okay. So, all right, if you guys can kind of appreciate the fact that there's all of this chaos going on, and chaos leads to more chaos until someone detaches themselves. So again, are we okay with this idea that the opposite of chaos is not order? Or rather, the cure for chaos is not order. The cure for chaos is detachment.
Yes.
And from detachment, right solutions can be identified that will ultimately create some foundation. Maybe we could even use the word some level of order, but it's not order to control others or exploit others. It is order to enable people to take care of themselves in a more effective way than long term. Again, I'm going back to spiral dynamics. There's spiral dynamics at every level, or every turn around the spiral has had a period of chaos. And has had elements of people trying to put in strict order, but you find out that strict order leads to more chaos. It's different chaos, but ultimately it will lead to a different type of chaos. We need to find that detached, centered place to come up with the right thing. Okay, so fair enough. By boring anybody?
No, this is good.
All right.
Not at all, not at all. This is really something to think about.
All right. And so that means that when you are meeting people, talking to people, all of us on this call right now, everyone you're going to see or hear today, you got to ask yourself, am I interacting with an attached individual or a detached individual?
Mm.
And
Good
then,
question.
and if I know that I'm dealing with people's attachments, what is that telling me about them? And so we're going to look at a couple of layers of the change grid, and I'm just going to start with a general one. Yeah, let's see. Now let's go back to this one. Yeah. All right. So where does the truth actually live on the change grid? The objective, dispassionate truth.
In the center?
In the center, maybe slightly downgrid, because this is where the world of analysis and studying and looking for patterns and all that sort of stuff. This down here is where learning becomes, well, learning happens because something needed to be looked at, solved, dealt with, whatever. But ultimately, knowledge arises from a downgrid movement as we work our way around the spiral. So this is where stuff is stored. So the truth gets stored here. The truth is experienced more by an individual in the center, because hopefully the biases are being reduced or set aside. Someone is in the middle of it. Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm talking about something so esoteric. Anyway, so, but it's nevertheless, it's true. And saying that only so I can say that the further we go away from the change root in any direction, while we may say that this is true, this is true, this is true, this is true, how many of you believe that it's really not the truth? It might be bits and pieces of the truth. And even if there are bits and pieces of the truth, it could be bits and pieces of the truth that have been distorted and generalized, as the case may be. So there is a version of the truth that may exist out here. But we may operate as though we believe it's the complete and total truth.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah. What we experience changes things. I like to say often the experience of the experience matters. And that's where this whole idea of reflection for me comes in.
Yeah.
Because often I start out with an idea about something, a belief about something, but my experience could rapidly change that.
Right. And this is where we're ultimately going to end up back at the center of the change group. But you're right, because as we're being surrounded by all of these voices that are some way or another presenting false information, presenting facts that have been distorted or generalized, the individual, the attached individual, I know for certain is in a distorted reality.
Mhm.
They're living in, they're sharing or experiencing an abbreviated part of it. That attachment is distortion. Oh, I'm trying to find better words to explain this, but obviously if people haven't thought about this a whole lot, it shouldn't be surprising to find out there's not a lot of language to come up with it, because I'm trying to avoid a particular word that I want to use in just a second. But this is what I know when I interact with other ones in social media, face-to-face, whatever, I have to understand that they are attached to what's going on. And along with that attachment could come from distortions, some generalizations, some issues that are impacting them that I may or may not benefit from having impact me. You with me on this? And so,
Yeah,
Yes.
that's really true, because if you can be a bit detached while someone is reacting and you can understand what you just said, you can better understand how to handle the next piece of communication from you.
right, because Linda's talking about them being upgrid. I don't want to be sucked upgrid along with them. I want to make a decision about the merits of what's going on upgrid so I can help them or whatever it is. Or like even same thing if it's outgrid.
Outgrid.
These people are pushing. They're on
Yeah,
an agenda. They're on a path.
I'm thinking
And
of Becky.
right. And they're pulling me along with them. One way or another, they might be asking me for my help. They might be putting me in charge of something. And then I wonder, how did that happen? And, one way or another, you're either getting sucked into their agenda or whatever. And that's great if the agenda is serving you, but how many people get sucked into other people's agendas, other people's success?
Yeah.
You guys do understand that all of the wealth that's being experienced by the top 10% of the world was created by 100% of the world. Does that make sense? It's like,
Yeah, yeah,
if I'm a corporation, I might be the CEO pulling in an absurd amount of money, but if it wasn't for everybody else, that money wouldn't be there. And
right.
so I've got 100% of the people working for the absurd, obscene wealth of a handful of individuals. That's getting sucked into someone. Why did we all, what do I say, get sucked into the formula that says, I'm going to be an employee of a business and they're going to pay me whatever they can get away with paying me so that they become wealthy. I'm sucked into their agenda, their growth, their goals. And for whatever reasons, I'm content, maybe, or I'm stuck, or I'm perturbed, but not at my threshold enough of disturbance enough to do anything about it. I'm being pulled into helping other people become profoundly wealthy or
Right.
profoundly powerful or profoundly whatever their goal is. Is anybody looking at that and kind of going like, well, that sucks? Right. Right. And so that's being pulled by the outgrid thing. Again, attachment is what's going on. And so I describe all these little voices inside and the voices that remain in your head after you've heard the external speak. You know, it's one thing to hear someone say something. It's another thing to hear them again and again and again in your head when you're replaying those messages or replaying those little sound bites or whatever the case may be. So that voice is no longer outside as it visiting your head. It's now part of your head. And it in turn has influenced you. And so you've got you that's in your head and you've got all these voices. Well, we refer to that as being the chorus of the mind. So the chorus of the mind is all of these voices. And unfortunately, all of these voices are singing their own song, their own lyrics to their own tune at different volumes in different keys, and it's happening all at once. Are you guys with me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how am I supposed to be the best me I can be if I am surrounded by attached people, living in an attached world, and my head is filled with all these voices that are singing
Go to a,
their stories?
what do you call that? A place where the monks go on top of a mountain.
Well, yeah, and that's a good thing. I could certainly seek out an ashram. I can
Yeah,
go
the
to
ashram, yeah.
meditation. I can do my yoga. I can go for a run. I can go on a bike ride. You know, there are things that I can do to quiet this chorus of the mind. But at a certain point in time, I have to go, and now we're going to go to the real thing. I have to go, I've been hearing so many voices in my head and outside of my head for so long. How can I be sure that my authentic voice even exists? Is it still there? Is there an authentic me? What's my true voice? Where's the me inside of my mind?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, it makes you wonder.
Right. And so we talk about that inside of this chorus of the mind, we need to find your authentic voice. And that authentic voice, we talk about the oracle of the self, learning how you can talk more effectively with you about you. This is about you finding that authentic voice. When people come to us, they bring to us whatever the chorus of their mind happens to be singing, whoever's loudest, whatever's most dissonant, whatever is causing them to stay in an earworm of negativity. You guys with me?
Yeah.
That's what they bring to us. Now, we as human development professionals can help them work among those voices by, brace yourself, becoming yet another voice. You guys with me? Yet another voice in their head. And that voice that we're bringing into the mixture is saying, hey, listen to me, listen to what we're saying. Look at this, don't listen to this, don't believe that. So my concern is that when we come along to help people, and I believe we help people in a positive way, far more often than not, we are another voice inside of that, massive chorus of the mind. So right. So hopefully what a lot of us are trying to do is help people find their own authentic voice, but we have to do so in a way that doesn't result in them basically adopting our voice as their internal voice.
Yeah, Stephen Covey in that 7 Habits of Highly Effective People talk about seek first to understand and be understood, right?
Yep.
So for me, that's about cultivating curiosity.
Right.
So I had to learn to adapt to that quite early in life, where,
Yep.
I use the power of inquiry to help understand where another person is coming from and their cultural values, what's most important to them.
Right.
Then, as Linda described, I could respond as best as possible accordingly.
Right. And so, by the way, that phrase I think came from Hippocrates.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's far more ancient than Covey. It's been around.
Ah,
I forget where we were. Oh, no, no, no. We were at Disney. And I believe it's in the Living Seas pavilion at Epcot, but there's a giant mosaic on one of the walls, and it says that we must seek to understand before we seek to be understood. And then it attributes, but I forget who it attributed. Somebody can look it up and let us know. Anyway, pardon me. And so I would like to think that the greatest work that we could do for a person as a client, or for a group of whatever nature they happen to be, is to help them to find and speak their authentic voice, so that as they are exposed to these insights from others, or these attempted manipulations by others, living that life outside of the center of the change grid, that they can better say, is that correct for me? Does that align with what I know to be true? Does that align with my authentic values, with the true thing I'm supposed to be? Because, and I'll just throw this out there, we can't keep believing that we are living our own life, when in truth we are living the attached lives that others have somehow impacted. I know that's babbling, but are any of us really us? Or are we what other people want us to be, need us to be, have tried to convince us to be? How long has it been since you spent any real time finding and listening to your authentic self, your authentic voice?
Well,
yeah.
yes, as you grow and learn, I think you change into your authentic self.
Do you?
Uh-huh.
Huh.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I always see it as becoming more of who you already are, because we have been conditioned by institutions, we have been conditioned by
Right.
family and
So,
all these other people.
okay, so if it's a matter of age and experience and all that sort of stuff, then right now we shouldn't have anybody in our age group or older who is sucked into other people's beliefs and values and decisions and actions. They should all be just in their authentic self. Do any of you know anybody your
No.
age or older who is
No.
lost in, drowning in, buried in whatever these distortions happen to be, that they've have come to end up creating the them they believe is authentic? Shags, you
No.
just unmuted. You want to throw something in?
Yeah, this is interesting.
Well,
Sorry I'm
thank
late.
you.
I had another appointment.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone. I
I try
think
to be as authentic as possible, but the
right.
real me scares people
Well, but see, and this is the whole thing then,
and
is
insults
what
people.
what is the authentic voice, your authentic voice, the real you? I get it that when I find my authentic self and I find my authentic voice, I then have to make some decisions about whether or not I'm really going to share that voice, and whether or not I'm not saying you have to be your authentic self or live your authentic truth. I'm just saying you should at least know it,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, that makes
Otherwise,
wow, that's powerful.
right. Otherwise, who are you? What are you? You're what other people need. What people have turned you into, whatever's going on. We need to be able to find this authentic voice. And then, maybe you guys do here. I mean, I would like to think that as human development professionals, you guys all have a stronger shot at, spending time with your authentic self than people that come to us as clients. So I hope that's true. But I think we always have our own stuff. We are all victims of the world we live in, and we're all participants in the world that we live in. So we need to become a little bit more thoughtful about that, a little bit more mindful as we go about making decisions. Now, because all this, and I know it went off on a really philosophical kind of bend, but the bottom line here is that I want to help people make the best quality decisions they can for themselves. That's it. I want to help people make the best quality decisions they can for themselves. And then if they want or need it, I can support them as they go about pursuing whatever those are. But I want to know that I'm helping an authentic person deal with an authentic issue in an authentic way. And that's tough to just go out there and go like, well, that's everybody. I don't know. Kathy, you just unmuted.
Yeah, no, I love this conversation. It's right up my alley. I think that, and I'm listening because I'm really learning. Um, for me, I mean, this is my life's path, trying to find my voice and be able to live it, which is very, very hard, because first of all, it's hard because that places you in a situation where if you have to voice it, if you are voicing it, it takes a lot of courage.
Yep.
And at different times in my life, I've had that courage, and at other times it's less so. So that's one thing. I think that the process, and the reason the process of finding your own authentic voice is so difficult, and this is what I try to do with my coaching, but this is very, very difficult, is helping people identify the stories they tell themselves, the stories that they live with, and identifying what those stories are in combination with using approaches for helping them reach their detached place, their PowerPoint. But a lot of it, when you think about how much of the world is illusion and how much of it is, there's always a story there. Everybody has a story. And if you can begin to understand your own stories, it takes a lifetime, I think, to really understand your own stories and face them and say, you know what, yeah, I was a poor kid growing up and such, and my mother was this and that, and that's why I'm this way. Whatever story we tell ourselves, positive or negative, it's still a story, because it's our way of coping with the world. And so trying to get at what is the story and what is truly, who you are and where you want to be, I think takes a long, long time. And I think that's
well, and I'm glad
I don't have an answer for you. I'm just saying I think that's what makes it so hard, and why most of us are not in that place, unless we're actively seeking it all the time. And even then you only get the tip of the iceberg, I think.
That's right. And I like that you said it, because Brian, that resonates with what you said, and then I triggered the whole what about crazy people that we all know. Maybe it is that the older we get, the more likely we are to find our authentic voice, or maybe the more likely we are to own our authentic voice. But there is also a very strong likelihood, in fact, in today's chaotic world, a greater likelihood than not, that you will never find your authentic voice.
Yes, that's what that Harvard professor was writing about. And I think his name is Brooks. He wrote a book called Strength of Strength, and he distills the difference between fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence. Crystallized intelligence tends to happen from his perspective, later years in life, where you're, like Kathy just described, you experience some things, you've been through some things, and that's not necessarily required. But at that point, you start to put the pieces of that puzzle together, or at least you're more interested in doing so. So, there's a lot of research that talk about people they suffer more from living with regret than dying with it. Right. So, and I'm that kind of person, like I hate unfinished business. And so I'm always looking to kind of settle the score in my own way of discovering more about myself. But to Kathy's point, I don't think there is a there to get to, right? Because I keep on peeling different layers, and it's fascinating and scary as hell at the same time.
Right. And, as I think Linda was pointing to, if you were one of these people who could actually achieve total detachment, you probably live in a monastery somewhere, because life has to happen. So, even then it's always going to be situational, which gets to what I really want to kind of go over with you guys. If we can kind of recognize that, there's not a lot of people out there who are speaking their authentic voice. And by the way, I said it earlier, I want to say it again. Just because you know your authentic truth, you have your authentic voice, you know who the authentic you really is, obligates you in no way, shape, or form to share that with another human being, right? Just because you are aware of who you are and what you're doing does not mean you should automatically blurt that all out there, because your truth may be something that could cause tremendous upheaval to other people and inconvenience in your life. So you get to pick and choose when you decide to share whatever is authentically you. And I think I bring that up because I think there's a lot of people out there right now. We don't need to get into any specific examples of it, but that could be interesting over a bottle of wine, who feel as though that their authentic self is not something that they should understand, but they should proclaim. And there's more and more pressure for people to become this authentic self. And that's going to mean there's a lot of people who are struggling to find their authentic self, but feel like in order to fit in with everybody else, they have to say that they have found their authentic self and behave in ways and do things that may or may not be the real truth of who they are. So was that cryptic enough for everybody?
Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think it's part of what I was saying earlier about courage and discernment. I think,
Yes.
learning to be discriminating and discerning about, first of all, understanding where you are, but then also knowing when to voice it and when to just shut up.
Right. Because, look, the authentic you is in fact, I'll go to the next slide, just say what we already know. The authentic you is very peaceful and quiet. It doesn't feel like it has any agenda. You're at the center of the change grid. You're detached from what's really going on, so you can decide if you need to actually go out there and do something. So I bring this up just to say this whole idea about attachment and detachment we've been talking about very much resonates with a layer of the change grid we talked about years and years ago. This is dated 1994, and then I guess I updated it 2010. So it's been around for a long time, where we talk about radial trends on the change grid in terms of orientation, reasoning abilities, esteem, harmony, functionality. We have had a layer of understanding about that for a long time. Well, because of our discussions with the Circle of Brilliance, we can add more to these radial trends and hopefully make the radial trend understanding an even more valuable tool as we do the work that we're out there doing. So now I kind of thought, as I was putting this together, that this also resonates quite a bit with what we were talking about with negativity versus positivity. And we kind of created this little summary diagram. We were just kind of talking about where does toxic negativity live? What's general negativity? What's toxic positivity? Toxic neutrality. So we had this. So I think that's something where I want to be factoring in as we have this discussion. Another thing that we looked at was, I skipped one. We talked about control. So where does someone, are they in, or what's happening to control as we work our way? So I've got these diagrams I just wanted to play with a little bit with you guys and see where we end up. So starting with involvement. We've said that detached is in the center of the change grid. I always think that needs another T, because we speak French, and so I look at that and I go, that's not, something's wrong with that word anyway. But I know it's
Yeah,
wrong.
I think it is. I think there is a T. Isn't there a T?
Detached?
Oh, I don't know. There should be.
No, it doesn't look right. I don't think there is one. I looked it up and there wasn't one. So, but I thought there should be one.
Don't be attached to it.
Yeah, don't get it. Yeah, I'm not attached to the outcome. Very good. So basically we said, look, at the center, we're detached. And I get it, if we move off center, we're relatively detached. These are all, scales of continuums here. So detached. If I look very far outgrid, upgrade, downgrade, ingrid, we said all four of these, you're more likely to become attached. Well, where does attachment become a problem, and where is a little bit of attachment a good thing? Remember, we said that something happens between the green circle and the red circle. What happens between the green circle and the red circle?
Life is lived.
That's where life is lived. And so I thought, well, what word kind of describes a decent amount of attachment, but still a little bit of detachment? What's in between? And I kind of like the word involved. So I'm involved in what's going on. And so that means I'm going to have certain aspects of it that I feel strongly attached about to it or whatever. I've got my own agenda, my own outcome, but other times I may very well carry with me a voice that says, wait, wait, wait. We need to look for more information. We got to look at more options. We need to weigh out some relative merits of the different options that lay before us. And so I think that this evolved element is an important thing for us to appreciate, that attachment is not necessarily a bad thing. It's when I become so attached to something, I am unable to see that there is benefit for stepping back into involvement, that there's any benefit for looking into other options, seeing other understandings, doing something that might be worth doing. Does that make sense as you guys look at this, radial trends?
Yes.
Yeah, yep. And so I thought, well, that's interesting. I can do something with that. And then I thought, well, let's look about influence. Now, this is not our influence over others, but how others are influencing us, the degree to which that's happening. And my concern is that, okay, in the middle, I can be authentic. I can just be me. And as me, I'm always looking at what's going on around me. I'm weighing out relative merits. I'm being very logical. All those good sorts of things are happening there. So I'm trying to find and operate within the authentic self. So the authentic me, that's what I'm trying to do. I know that as I start to leave that place of great authenticity, by the way, when you're in the center of the change grid, going back to the first time we learned radial trends, this idea about orientation, are you going to be self-oriented, other-oriented, or information-oriented? And what we learned is that as you move to any extreme, people become self-oriented. As they move between the red circle and the green circle, they can be oriented towards we always continue to be self-oriented because that's how life works. But we start to introduce others into our orientation, needing and appreciating what might be going on with others. And when we're more in the center of things, we can add to that an appreciation or an orientation towards the information that's around us as well. Edie, you're unmuted. You can go, or you can unmute yourself and say whatever you'd like. Your hands up. Okay.
Oh, I'm
There you
sorry.
go.
I didn't mean to do that, honey.
Oh, no
I'm
worries. Okay.
multitasking.
All right. No worries. No worries.
T,
Yep.
I did find the quote. First
yeah.
seek to understand, then be understood. Everyone thinks that's a quote from Stephen Covey since it's one of his 7 habits. But if you go back and research, you'll find it was first spoken by Saint Francis of Assisi in the 1200s.
Oh, okay,
Oh.
good. St. Francis.
St. Francis.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you for that.
And
Stephen
then
Covey often appropriates things without
without attribution. Yeah, I'll tell you what makes sense about that too is that that's in an animal exhibit. And so St. Francis of Assisi was the one who could speak to the animals, right? Didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Animals and nature. Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
That's really good. Thanks for looking that up, Linda. Okay, so this oops, wrong one. So many things. It's attached, involved.
control one.
Here,
Yeah.
control. So as I start to move between the green circle and the red circle, I add to my appreciation of information. No. I start to become influenced by those other voices in the chorus.
So you move from being internally driven to externally led.
And interestingly enough, we should just do the gifted students program. So at a certain point, I want to come back to what's the chorus? What are these chorus members? Who's singing well and who's out of tune? Which ones are outside of you and which voices are inside of you? Is it a voice of one or a voice of many? I think that as we start to look at all these layers simultaneously, we're going to learn a great deal about it. But one of the things that I wanted to bring forth is that this you in the middle could be something you do experience from time to time. But I said that the person in the middle is always observing the world around them. And that's why it's like inside of this, I want you to have your perfect little quartet. or maybe it's a small group of individuals or thoughts or whatever, entities, aspects of you who you have grown to trust, appreciate, admire what they bring to your decision making. So it's like you want to call into your assistance this this very small corral, this little group that you know you can count on. And as you seek their counsel and their guidance, these little voices that are inside of the green circle, you're able to refine what's going on to make a really high quality decisions and move on. So these are your best singers. There's not a bunch of them. This is like, you know, think about your favorite a cappella group. For me, it's Voctive. This is about Voctive. All these, everyone's singing in beautiful harmony, adding their own little element to it to help me end up with the best outcome, the best decision, the best understanding I can. That said, as I move away from that centered place, move out of my little comfortable corral, I'm going to start to interact with a lot of other voices that could be coming from outside, external sorts of places. Shags, your hands up. You're welcome to say whatever you'd like.
Yeah, you mentioned move away, and I must because I have something standing at 11 every Tuesday.
Ah,
At least that's going to end pretty soon, but
yeah, I'll be done in just a minute.
no, I need to run to it, so I'm going to say
Okay, well, we miss you while you're gone.
bye.
Okay, bye. Bye. And then we just have to be aware that there are voices that we are also exposed to, maybe even inside of our own heads, that are screaming with whatever that agenda happens to be. And maybe even they're screaming in a quiet way, the message downgrid or ingrid that says, withdraw, hold back, don't worry about it, let it go. You know, these voices can still be quietly screaming because they're so predominant in our thinking that they can end up pulling us into depression, pulling us into withdrawal, pulling us into other sorts of things. So we've got all these voices inside and outside. I think we can draw an interesting map that shows where they're likely to become internal versus external, when they're likely to become one or many, and how that may or may not be helping us. Now, again, I'm doing this because this is the circle of brilliance. I fully understand that the conversation we've had for this past hour and the last time around is two things. One, more than most people can handle. I've always said that I believe that people who are attracted to the world of tension management are smarter than the average bear. You have to be blessed with equal amounts of intellect and intuition to really be able to understand tension management and apply tension management and do all these things that we associate with merging and that. And so I get it. You guys are not the typical audience that I would be targeting. So I can give you programming, I can give you topics that would simply leave the rest of the world befuddled, if not in a mess. And so it's just too much. It's too much all at once. So I don't think that what we've talked about for the past hour and the sessions beforehand, and maybe a couple of sessions yet to come, are something that would actually be easily sellable as a program to the marketplace. That being said, I believe that society, civilization, everyone in it needs to understand the things that we've been talking about today so that they can stop being victimized, stop living a life that everybody else wants them to have or whatever, and become a little bit more in tune with their authentic self and what that authentic life needs to bring. So I feel like there is a need for this subject matter, but we have to simplify it in such a way that it can be easily approached, understood, digested, and utilized by, you know, by people, by regular old humans. And so there's some work to be done. But sometimes the things we come up with in the circle are just for the circle. But sometimes we go, no, this is something that we need to put some energy into simplifying for others. You guys agree with that? Or
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think you're right. If it was simplified, maybe with examples, I think it would sink in very fast.
Yeah.
And people would really, really relate to it.
Yeah.
So could this be part of like, or in addition to things like the path of self-discovery, those kind of, because people will get that kind of title when you're saying, story about you, for you kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think it's one of these things where you have to give people lots of little glimpses, lots of little bits and pieces. And as they become comfortable with those bits and pieces, you can say, all right, let's bring them to the next level. Let's let them see how these things all fit together. That it
Okay.
isn't like isolated, standalone thoughts and whatever, but it really is, a giant toolbox
Yeah.
of what we
Yeah.
happen to call tension management.
Because
So,
this slide right here would be really good because there's so much of thought leaders, influencers, those kinds of labels and titles that, sell your program, and it's based on their particular steps that work for them. And they say it's
yeah,
like, I'll sell you, I'll give you the exact steps that made me X, Y, Z, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to do the same for you.
well, that's right. And the thing, and then Kathy, I saw you unmuted. I'd love to hear what you have to say. That maybe sometimes this level of influence gets to be extreme, and now no longer are the outside voices trying to influence you. They're trying to control you. So very far out grid, those voices are the voices of cults. They're the voices of dastardly deeds and all sorts of things. So we're up here, the voice that's trying to control you is just trying to say you are in harm's way. Stop looking at anything and just get yourself out. So the voice is just trying to save you while you can still be saved. And other voices we'll talk about, but this is about the voices are controlling you, the voices are influencing you. And so where do you draw the line? Kathy, what do you have to share?
Yeah, I think I think it is an incredibly difficult concept to share and to make simple. I mean, I'm just looking at this chart and I'm thinking, well, this could be a useful tool with somebody who is, an evolved client and a self-aware client
Yeah.
who could actually go through a process of helping, of analyzing through conversation, what do I look like and what do I experience in my authentic self? In what situations am I influenced, and in what situations am I controlled? And they don't even have to know tension management to do that, but they can you can sort of create I don't know, make a dent in people's
right.
understanding
A simple lesson on
yeah,
that. Yeah, right.
on that continuum. A simple lesson on that continuum is all I wanted to say at this point. I just haven't thought about it much, but that's what occurred to me right now.
Yeah. Good. Thank you for that. Yeah.
That's
All right. Well,
good.
we've gone quite a bit over, so we'll pick up where we left off next time around. Obviously, sooner or later, we need to get to the point of how do you go about applying this in the short run to the clients that you're working with. I think, again, I'd say that if you, to Kathy's point, if you have a client who is already a student of personal growth and development, they've already been on that journey, they may be very ready to hear this kind of stuff. My assumption is anyone who's in the circle of brilliance is ready to hear this kind of stuff. But even still, I felt like I needed to be very careful in how I laid this all out from the start of today's call, because I thought this can get overwhelming really quick, and I'm on my own.
I love it.
I'm on my own path of discovery for this one too. So,
Yeah,
all right.
I love it.
Thank you. All right. Well, we'll continue where we left off on Thursday. So thanks everybody. Take care.
Okay.
Thank you.